So, folks, before we start the interview, there is a little bit of sad news I got to put right up here at the front. Earlier this summer, Chris Truesdale, one of the members of Dream Street, very sadly, after a bad case of COVID-19, passed away in early June, just before he would have turned 35. And the band did a little, mini online reunion, stuff like that. But it is a cruel reminder that life is not fair. And, of course, we're dedicating this interview to him, his fans, his bandmates, his family, all that stuff. Hope, best wishes given the circumstances. Hi, folks. Steven here. I'm on the phone with Peter Moshay. He's an audio engineer. He does a lot of audio work for music and maybe a few other things. But as far as Pokemon goes, he did the audio engineering for the recording session of They Don't Understand by Dream Street, which of course was on the soundtrack to Pokemon 2000. And we're going to talk about that as well as his more recent work and really his whole career, which is very interesting. He's worked with some really interesting folks over the years. But Peter, why don't you go ahead and start off at the beginning? Where are you from originally, and how did you get into doing music?
Hi, everybody. I started growing up in California, out in the San Fernando Valley and Hollywood area, and being a musician myself when I was younger, I got very into the technical end of it early on. I worked in music stores as a kid because I would hang out in them and take lessons at the music stores. And waiting for my mom to pick me up or my dad to pick me up, I spent so much time in the music stores fiddling around with all the stuff that they had. I ended up working in a music store at a very young age, and that kind of progressed into doing more technical things, where I went into working in recording studios and kind of pushed my playing to the side and really fell in love with doing audio recording and stuff like that. And then it slowly went into working with a lot of particular bands, going on the road with them as well, helping them to kind of duplicate the records that they were making live. So, and being an audio engineer out on the road. So I gravitated towards that, and it's been a great career for all these years. I've worked with countless bands that many people might know.
Yeah, and I think one of the big ones is actually Hall & Oats, which I'm sure most folks have at least heard of if they're not exactly familiar with who that is. How did that one come about?
Well, after many years of being, traveling with bands on the road, you meet a lot of other bands. I had, traveled around with lots of bands over the years, the group Journey, the Cars, Manilow, groups like Quiet Riot, rock groups, Kenny Loggins. Over that traveling time, you meet lots of other people. Well, in the travels, I met some of the guys in the Hall & Oates band, and they needed somebody, and I fit the bill, and started working with them back in 1987, and have still, all the way till now, I still do work with them. They're out there actively always touring and recording. And we started this show about 11 plus years ago called Live from Daryl's House, which is an online live musicians playing in Daryl's house. And we started this show online, and that's kind of become its own thing. So we've been streaming that show on the internet since about dial-up ended and we had DSL. As soon as we got enough bandwidth to be able to put video with the audio, we were doing it, and we've been doing it ever since. And we've spawned off into having a live musical restaurants with live music in them called Daryl's House Club. And I run those places now where we have music every day of the week, live music and great food.
Yeah, it definitely has helped you out this year. You've been very ahead of the curve with some of your knowledge there, and it's really paid off this year. We'll talk maybe more about what you're doing more recently a little bit later in the interview, but since a lot of folks may not be familiar with what goes in on the technical side of doing a recording, can you sort of briefly describe what your responsibilities are on a typical studio recording?
Yeah. Well, once the song's written, that song was written by Steve Diamond and Robbie Neville, two songwriters themselves. They'll sketch out the song. Generally, they might sketch it out either on an acoustic guitar, piano, whatever their instrument is. And then, like, the two guys will get together maybe and finish off the arrangement of the song, just how it'll basically go. Then you got to go into the studio, which now is your laptop or even your iPad or your phone. But we would go into the recording studio and put down all the individual instruments that's like the drums, the bass, the guitars, the vocals, backing vocals, all that kind of stuff. And you do it either all at one time in part or in pieces. So, for instance, like the guys, they would record their vocal parts. Usually we would put them in the same room, divided with some sound treatment, sound baffling between them, and they would sing their parts kind of all down together. And sometimes maybe if somebody messed up a lyric or this and that, we'd go back and fix it. That's the general idea of how you would try to do it. A lot of the instruments would be pre-recorded. That would be done before you would do the vocals. But that's kind of how it goes. You would put the instrument track down and then do the vocals generally last. Then after that comes the mix down process. Once everything's done, the mix down process is separate. And generally the mix down process is done within a day. And you really focus on making it sound the absolute best it can.
Okay, that's a great overview. So how did you wind up working on They Don't Understand then? You talked a little bit about the writing team. Did they happen to just fall in your lap there, or were they in the orbit of certain people? How did that come about?
Yeah, they were in orbit. Both Steve and Robbie Neville were at the time working with Daryl Hall and Oats, both Hall and Oats, and was working on those records at the same time. So when this project came up, I just happened to be working on their other projects as well. So, of course, the man in the room gets the gig, and I just moved over to that project that day. So, at that period of time, every single day was a new project, whether it was the Dream Street project or I at the time was working with Mariah Carey or Daryl and John. There was always something going on every day at that point in time. It was a big music machine in New York City at that time.
Yeah. New York always pretty much known for its music, but especially busy then and largely now as well. All right, well, what did you know about Pokemon when it came in? You seem to have some familiarity, but you definitely were not in the age demographic for the franchise at the time. What did you know about Pokemon?
Oh, yeah. I've been in Japan so many times, and Pokemon was huge all over the world, but especially in Japan. So I had seen it quite a lot. And some of the guys, Steve had kids, and many of my friends had kids. So it was definitely around big time at the time, always around. And Nintendo was so big at the time, too. So everybody, I think, was aware of it at the time.
So you actually had some decent knowledge, which is, a little different. We always hear those stories with, Donna Summer, or even more recently with Bill Nighy and some of the other folks on Detective Pikachu. But you seem to have sort of an inside track, so you kind of knew what you were getting into. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, there was also, at that period of time, a lot of people in the music industry starting to work on music specifically for video games and stuff, because video games at that time were starting to become really ingrained not only in culture, but it was big business, and people wanted to up the quality of the audio and the music on video games then and get, just like this, custom songs put in. It created a whole industry in the recording world, and now it's a big part of the video game industry.
Okay, well, going back to They Don't Understand and the recording session for that, obviously you had, there were various instruments in there, and of course there were the five guys. They were really kind of like late middle school, early high school back then in 2000. but they were coming in to do their vocal parts. One interesting thing, you had mentioned the kid that Steve Diamond had. Cole Diamond is listed as a song inspiration for They Don't Understand. I don't know exactly what happened there. It sounds like he probably was talking with his dad and said something along the lines of, hey, you could rework this into a Pokemon song, why don't you? And somehow that all went through there. But there are two versions of the song. How did that kind of affect the recording process?
Yeah, what happens during the recording process is when you're doing one, at least at that time, it was kind of the start of the period of where people would think about doing multiple versions of the same song. Because if you would do a pop version of the song, at that time there was a lot of hip hop going on, a lot of rap going on, a lot of different versions, a lot of electro dance music going on at the time. So when you're doing the song, you would immediately think like, hey, would this song work as like a dance club song? Could you speed it up? So we would always think that way, and we would take those original tracks that were recorded, maybe just the vocals, and get it together with a person that would do more dance-oriented tracks and let them change it up into maybe a different version of the song. Very common. It keeps the cost down, too, because you've already kind of got the song already laid out and the vocals done on it, and you can take those things and just add different music to it and make it a new song.
And how did that exactly play out here? There are about half a dozen lines that are different between the two versions of the song. Basically, it just kind of the other version removes all the Pokemon references and replaces them with more relationship-based stuff. Did you have to like record it through like both times, or did you record the lines that were different separately? How did that work for this session?
Yeah, we would generally do alternate takes and have some alternate version lines in there and keep them separate. And just like you would do maybe in a song that has cursing in it, you would, separately record those so you could do a separate mix with those vocal lines in it. And back then, the music was recorded digitally back then, so it would be easy to splice them in.
Yeah, I figured you might want to save a little work there and not have to go through. You might do maybe the line before that and the line after it to sort of make it feel more natural, but it sounds like you wouldn't record like the whole thing, right?
Yeah, maybe not the whole song. We would just pick the lines, but you would always just record the whole line, not just pop in a word. You'd record a whole new line because a lot of times you'd have to change the way you would phrase it or something like that. It just depends on what you're trying to do and say.
Gotcha. All right. Well, do you have any other particular memories of the recording session? I know you were kind of in a separate room from the performers and whatnot because you had to monitor the levels and things like that, but any other particular memories from that session?
Oh, yeah. We definitely spent time hanging out and talking. They were very interested in hearing because they knew about the group Hall & Oates, and they were interested in talking about Mariah Carey at the time and all the different projects and asking about. Artists always kind of like to ask about the other people you're working with, and they're always interested in hearing stories about it. So I don't remember exactly specifically what we talked about, but I do remember that we were sitting around, and since they were young and they were always interested in the music, of course, because they were musicians, I'm sure we were telling stories about, I was telling them about things that were going on and working with other artists at that time. I just remember they were just such great kids, man. They really were. And we always had a blast. And I saw them for multiple days, actually, because I was working in the same studios. And so they were still in there doing stuff, working on other songs at the time. So, yeah, it was a fun time. And, it was always fun working during that era of time.
All right. Well, obviously, it's been 20 years since that was recorded. You've done a ton of stuff since. What's some of the stuff you've been working on more recently?
Well, we have our venue that we work on. We have our Live from Daryl's House TV show that we've been doing for 11 years now. We have a couple of music and restaurants. Music venues and restaurants, Daryl's House Club in upstate New York here, where I'm at now. And we stream our live shows 5 nights a week usually. So you can see a lot of the stuff that we're doing already on the web. So you can watch. It's kind of like peeking into a club that has lots of live music, and it's super high quality going out. So you're watching music being played live by musicians, great bands. We always have great bands 5 nights a week, and we have lots of music up there. And we just like to keep the music world alive out there, and just expose it to people.
And yeah, like we said earlier, you had some experience that really has paid off, given the current circumstances, which are unfortunate, but you've managed to adapt relatively well. You mentioned the Facebook for Daryl's house and whatnot. Do you have any social media or website you want to that's for you specifically?
I don't really. I have my own webpage, my petermoshay.com, but it's. I'm an extension of the artists I work with, and I have been absolutely blessed to have worked with all the best artists in the world. I have done hundreds, if not thousands, of records over the years and shows, and traveled the entire planet numerous times. I really like to be seen through the artists I work with. I am an extension of the people I work with, and I love for people to go to our webpage, our Daryl's House Club Facebook page, and just check out some of the bands. I engineer and record and do the video production for all of the bands up there, and you're going to be amazed. I guarantee people will find a new band that you didn't know about that you'll love.
All right. Well, thank you very much. It's been great having you on, Peter.
Thanks for having me.
This has been Stephen Reich. All right, folks. Thanks.